Can I take your order?
Yeah. You have to try this.
Okay, just a bite.
Okay, so hello and welcome to our first podcast.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, social takeout.
Small bites of social discussion.
My name is Sarai. I'm from California. I live in Berlin and I'm an opera singer.
And my name is Jeremy. I'm from the Sex. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's Toronto. Drake coined it. Search it up. And I'm a singer-songwriter based in Berlin.
So the current climate we're recording right now is the midst of the coronavirus and the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and the protests and riots across the U.S. and the world, really.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of talk about how black and white people interact with each other. But literally almost no discussion about how different minority groups relate to each other and see each other, in what light they see each other.
Yeah. So that's what we're talking about today. And we have a guest, Mark Bautista. He is an Alaskan multidisciplinary artist, classical singing and fiber arts, and is also based in Berlin for the last 3 years.
Hi.
Yeah,
Hi, Mark.
Thanks for having me.
Thank
you.
for agreeing to be here for our experiment. Yeah. So when I was doing some research for like the reference materials for this discussion, I found that there was a lot of information about how minorities are compared to each other or like rated. I'm using air quotes because obviously you can see them. So how other minorities are like compared or rated towards white people. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Like how they compare to white people and how close to white people they are, the better they're rated. So there was a lot of like information about that discussion, but almost no information about how minorities interact with each other. And the number of like far right sites that popped up when I was searching this term, like how do minorities interact with each other? How do they relate to each other? What are the relationships like between social groups? It was just like really alarming. So,
I'm sorry you had to go through that.
Yeah, that was traumatizing. Almost as traumatizing as like everything else going on in the world. But so with that, all of that in mind, the first question I want to ask is, what is everyone's racial or ethnic background?
I'll go first.
Okay.
My mom and my dad is Indian. I also have an immigrant experience because I was brought up in Canada, Toronto.
I have, I guess, it's kind of similar experience with my family, and I'm from the Philippines. Was born there, but then we immigrated to the United States, Alaska of all places. Completely different, totally different land.
I want to ask you more about that later.
So I identify myself strangely though, because I haven't been back to the Philippines since I left, which was a long time ago. So when I choose labels for how I identify myself, I consider myself more Alaskan more than anything.
Okay,
which is
interesting.
But I definitely still have that label for myself as Filipino, obviously. So.
Very serious discussion. Jeremy is desperately trying to get his dog to be quiet.
I swear to God, I'm not the one panting.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get her to stay quiet. Her name is Bree. She's a cockapoo.
She's adorable.
Yeah. But so I'm Black. I'm American. I guess the term is African American, but I don't really identify that. If people really ask, and I know them well, I say that I'm a descendant of slaves because I am. And so like, I don't have an African identity. Do you know what I mean? I don't have familial relationships on the continent of Africa. So how did your family decide to move to, I guess, the US, but why Alaska?
It's actually a really complicated story. But first, before what I said earlier about me identifying more as Alaskan, I don't mean Alaskan like as Alaskan Native, like an indigenous Alaskan, but more of just like Alaska, the location.
Yeah. American.
American,
Yeah.
yeah. Just as clarification, my aunt was the first one to move to the United States, and she moved to started off in California, then moved to Virginia, and then kind of brought a lot of my family over. My aunt has 8 siblings,
Oh wow.
so
Okay.
huge family, and then I have my cousins and everything. So she moved to Virginia, and then my grandfather came, and then it was in the middle of the oil boom in the 80s. So all of a sudden, it was like, oh, jobs in Alaska. So I think it was more out of, honestly, for my family, it was more out of necessity. There was opportunities happening, and it might have not been their first
Sure.
choice.
Yeah.
And it's sort of the same, similar to a lot of immigrant stories. They're actually going after opportunity in many cases, and sometimes you end up in places where you totally don't really want to be there. But
Absolutely.
yeah, you go where the opportunity is.
Yeah.
Where did you grow up, Sarai?
I grew up in
I'm
Los
always
Angeles.
confused because
I know.
there's a million places.
There's not a million places. I grew up in Pasadena, which is in Los Angeles, from the time I was born until I went to college.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Then it was all over the place.
Then I moved all across the country and internationally and everywhere.
So for my, oh God.
Yeah, yours is the one that's actually complicated.
Yeah, it's like all over the place because I was born in Dubai. I was there until I was like 5, I think, 5.5. And then I was moved to Kerala, which is like the southern tip of India, where my dad is originally from. I lived there for 3 years and then came back to Dubai. Then left Dubai to go to London, lived there for some time, and then ended up in Toronto. So, and now I'm in Berlin. What's next?
But like, where were you raised?
What age are we
Like-
talking about?
I would say until, like, where did you spend like your formative?
Between
like, childhood
Dubai
years?
and India, because the first part was Dubai. I was born and brought up there, but then there was a 3 year period I was in the southern village of India. I know, and that did have a big impact on the way I think because of my grandparents. My grandparents grew me there. So, and then I moved to back to Dubai as well. So, and then moved to London when I was 18.
Did you also have extended family that was really close by?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We all lived right next to each other. At one point, we all lived in the same house.
Oh Lord.
There was always something going on. There's always lots of sound. So yeah, it was really my aunts who raised me. My dad is in the military, which adds a whole nother layer to this whole thing.
Yeah.
Because he was always deployed growing up, so he was maybe home for like a year, or 2 years, or like for a while. It was like there was a point where I think end of elementary school where all of a sudden he was constantly deployed.
Oh wow.
So it was, it was extended family was a huge part of my life.
That's interesting.
So,
Yeah, same. So my grandmother lived next door, and then both of my mother's siblings lived across the street. Okay, so with all of that, what did your parents and grandparents and aunts tell you about other people, about other races growing up? Yeah. So.
Okay.
Okay.
You go.
All right. So let me tell you about my grandmother, who my mom was a flight attendant, which means she was and is a party girl. So she was just off all the time, doing whatever. Love you, Mom. So my grandmother was really the one who raised basically all 6 of her grandkids. But how do you even say this? She did not like Mexican people. So it was always just like the Mexicans this and the Mexicans that, and they're lazy. But then in the second breath, like, would have Mexican people helping her at home, like,
And she loves them
exactly.
at the same time.
And
Yeah.
then at the same time, she adopted this man who like was at every family event from like the time I was 8 until I went to college, and like I know his wife and his kids, you know, and she loved him.
Yeah.
So it was like this really weird relationship she had to Mexican people of just like, there are too many of them and I don't like them, but then at the same time I love this man like my own son, and
Yeah.
you know, I have them around my home all of the time. So it was just like this very weird sort of thing I heard growing up.
In my family, it was kind of similar. It was something that was never really spoken about in public, but it was definitely a discussion that happened at home. Where I grew up in Alaska is very, very diverse. There's a huge Filipino community, a Korean community, Alaska Native community. There's just people from everywhere in South Pacific, all over the U.S. And on the surface, we all got along. On the surface, and when I'd come home, there would the dinner table was always full of like, well, this Native person did this, and I ran into this drunk Native. There's this huge problem with racism against Indigenous people in Alaska still,
And Canada.
I'm sure. Yeah, it was always a private thing, and it would always be interesting. It was like they'd wear a mask out in public, being like, they don't want to cause any problems. They want to be this perfect citizen, perfect American kind of thing. But as soon as you come home, it's like this weird transformation that happens. So
that's kind of along the lines of that Ali Wong stand-up where she's
Exactly.
talking about like her
Yes.
she and her husband
Oh
just
my
get
God.
home and she says we shit on Korean people,
Yeah.
and it's just like, you know, this is very
And she said something very
true.
interesting. If you marry your own race,
Yeah.
it's like almost like an open ticket to be able to like shit on, be
Yeah,
racist
exactly.
together,
Right.
sort of idea.
And it's like I roll my eyes at that, but it's like, yeah, okay, how much of that is like 100% accurate?
Because both your experiences are very much the same, and
Yeah.
then or something similar, so you're able to project your racism or prejudice towards a particular group of people. In my case, it was basically, I have like two parts to this, because I grew up in Dubai, which is an extremely multicultural city, but also extremely racist. And I grew up in a village with my grandparents. So I grew up actually not liking darker skinned people. There's family members who said things like if I say I'm going to go have a shower, they would say like, don't shower too much because you're not going to be white anyways. It's like open racism.
Oh God.
I know, white in sense like skin is like lighter,
Yeah.
but that falls into the idea of race in general, because you just, in the end, it's some sort of a self-hatred that the Indian community sort of put into me in many ways. Another story on a tangent that I wanted to say was
Okay.
the Nikita thing. I think we've actually talked about
Yeah.
this. My first girlfriend, which is so funny to say because I'm so gay, but this was in kindergarten, and I had a girlfriend. You're not thinking girlfriend like in a sexual way or anything. You just hold her hands and stuff
sure.
like that.
My cousin was married in kindergarten.
Exactly. And her name was Nikita, and they made fun of me for dating her because she was a black girl. They found it cute that I actually have a girlfriend.
Yeah.
If anything, my parents were so
my
happy that, oh my God, I got a straight son. but it started right there, where the racial sort of hatred towards the other or darker skin, things like that, started right there.
I have a question to ask you, actually, Jeremy. In the Philippines, there's this huge, and probably all of Asia, there's this huge thing of skin lightening and
Yes.
everything. And
Yeah.
from when I was a little kid, there was always, don't play in the sun, you'll get too dark.
Oh,
yes.
Pinch your nose.
The black
it's too
community's
flat.
here,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Ooh.
My grandmother was always like, and okay, I grew up thinking that I was dark skinned, okay, because like a lot of members of my family can pass, and so it was always, Sarai, get out of the sun. You need to go back inside. Like, stop it. And it's like, California, for Christ's sake.
I just want to go to the beach.
Yeah. It's like, I can't escape it. Sorry.
But yeah, that's actually true, because skin lightening is a big thing in India as well. I think it also falls into like who works in the farm versus who doesn't have to work in the farm.
So it's like a
That's
status
sort of-
symbol as well.
It's a status symbol, and that's again the caste system
Interesting.
that actually happens there. My question on this is like, I know this was your experience, what your parents taught you or your family taught you, but did you accept this as fact, or did you question it?
Absolutely.
At that age?
At that age, well, I didn't have a choice.
Right.
Especially with the whole stay out of the sun, wear sunscreen, the pinching your nose thing was really, really awful. Because they
What?
wanted me to have, because like they were so ashamed of having a Filipino
Features,
nose.
yeah.
They wanted a more white nose.
Oh my god. I was like, how does that have to do with color? I don't get it.
And when you hear those things over and over again, you just learn that, I'm not acceptable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
of course, at that age, at least for me, I just believed it because I didn't hear anything otherwise.
Yeah.
And so that, I don't know, that self-hatred that started really early on, and it really did influence my choices thereafter. Yeah.
So like personally, it's kind of that same thing. It's like when you hear something really early on, repeatedly, you kind of internalize it. And like the things that my grandmother was saying about Mexican people, I don't think I ever really believed it, but I understood that I shouldn't really be friends with them because I would be embarrassed if they came home and then my grandmother said something. And then fast forward to high school and my best friend happened to be Mexican. Yeah. But it's definitely this like this thing you internalize about things you have no control over, like your nose or your skin color. It's like being in the sun should be enjoyable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In my case, unfortunately, I think it did have an effect. Because if I think back on my life in Dubai, where there's a lot of black people from America, from Africa, from various parts of Africa, but I did not even have one black friend. Why is that?
Yeah.
I can't particularly remember a time that I said like, I'm not going to be friends with you because you're black.
Sure.
But I just did not have any friends. But I had white friends,
subtle,
I had Asian friends, I had Indian friends, I had Arab friends, but never any. So now that I think of it, maybe in some way, shape, or form, it did affect me. But then again, fast forward to now, I'm doing a podcast with Sarai.
Yeah. And in a singing group with 3 other black people.
Exactly, yeah. So that brings me to my next question. When did you actually realize that these perceptions were not necessarily true? I think you sort of explained it, but was there a particular point in your life that you knew like, okay, this is bullshit?
I would think that it started when I started defying my parents' wishes and forming my own community, because before then I was in this very bubble sheltered Filipino community, and honestly in Juneau where I grew up, the music community is very white, and so when I started moving into that community, the whole idea of stick to your own kind started to go away. But then also I started making friends with Alaska Native people, other people from different places around the world. And really I was just, at first, and I would always have those feelings of, is this okay? Kind of thing. Am I safe with these people? Kind of, because I still have these ideas of like,
it's very ingrained.
Exactly, like the stereotype that my family would always say were like Alaska Natives are always drunk and blah blah blah, and it's like you have to be careful, they're gonna rob you. I'm like, but my best friends are, like you were saying about your Mexican friends. It's like this is it's totally. It was a conflict for a while. It was I was like, I don't know what to believe. There was this like dissonance happening because I didn't want to, because family was really important to me.
Sure.
And it was just like, who do I stay loyal to, you know?
Yeah. Interesting. I think for me, it was definitely this experience in high school. So until high school, I went to very white private schools where I was the only black person in every single class. Like, I think maybe the second to last year in private school, there was one other black girl, and I was like really excited, but then like we couldn't be friends because there were too many black people sitting together, you know? And then so I was finally in like a situation where there were other Black people, where there were Mexican people, where there were all different types of Asian people, like that I just hadn't experienced before. And so it was like just exposure to like show me that, okay, my grandmother's full of shit. Like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. Like, sorry, Grandma. But you know, like, these things are not true. It's like they're stereotypes, and like maybe some stereotypes are rooted in truth, but I don't think I necessarily even believe that, you know. So it really just took like exposure, I think, for me. Yeah.
Same here, because for me there was no like a defined moment. It was such a gradual process. I would literally say, and I'll be the first to admit, it would probably be like 5 years ago where, I hate this word, but woke. But you really understand, oh, so that is what's happening. We are in a system. We are, there's injustice actually being done to some groups of people. Like, until then it was like, if you work really hard, you can get to whatever you want to do. That is sort of the thing that's fed into me, especially, I'm guessing it's very similar in Filipino communities too. Like, we work really hard, you get what you want.
Exactly.
Sort of Indian communities are all about that. Go to school, study everything, and you get what you want to get. But it was a gradual process, because I started hearing things like my parents loving, for example, Black excellence. Loves the fact that Barack Obama became president. Loves Beyonce. She's an amazing singer. Loves Whitney Houston. Oh my God, my dad loves Whitney Houston. But at the same time, then if a Black person comes to the house, you would just look out the people and what do you want?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm like, there's this sort of disconnect over here. Like, there's something wrong over here.
I would say, like, even more broadly, like, your parents' reaction is very much the standard reaction. It's like, we love these Black things, we love these great Black people, but when we see Black people, it's like, oh, it's a little shady, like, what's going on here?
Exactly. Or do not drive through a Black neighborhood. But they would say things based on race, and I'm like, that is not nice to actually do that. Again, it came to exposure, going and actually being friends with these people, and understanding, okay, my family is actually being ridiculous at this point. And then making that identity after that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so then all of that conversation about like what your family said about other races or like the indigenous people. So what were you told growing up about your own racial identity? So personally, it was... it's like, how do we even describe this? It was very much like, yes, we're Black, but why can't I also claim like the Native American side of my ancestry? Because like most of the people in my family can pass for something else, and I'm one of the few that just looks Black, like, you know, like can't claim anything else. And then on top of it, it was like this, we were privileged, and my grandmother and her sister worked really hard and like just amassed a lot of properties, and so we were financially very secure. But there was this idea that they had that they were the only Black people who had ever achieved anything, you know, and so all other Black people are not as good, you know. I told Jeremy this one time because we were talking about dating. We might get to that in another podcast, in another episode. But so there was this Black guy, and he was trying to talk to me, and my grandmother was just in the store, and I was waiting for her. And then she came out and she was like, we're not paying all this money for her to go to school to marry some N-word, you know? And I was just like, oh, okay, interesting.
Can I ask you a question on that? So when she said the N-word, was it Black people in general or a particular kind of Black person?
Him specifically.
But what him specifically though?
You know, it's a word that she didn't actually use, so when she said it, it was really shocking, and it let me know that she was serious, and it let me know that she did not think highly of this person, and like, I don't know him. I have no idea what he was about. He was trying to talk to me on the street, so probably not that great of a person, but had nothing to do with the fact that he was Black, you know? So I guess when she said that, it was just like this idea of Black people, you know, this idea of someone who's hanging out on the street, you know, in the afternoon. But
Yeah.
he was coming out of the grocery store, you know,
Yeah.
like we were at the grocery store, you know. So yeah, it was very strange. And so it took me, I think, a really long time to unlearn a lot of that. And it really, I think, wasn't until I got out of all white spaces that I had to even define for myself what being Black meant, you know, because I think even within the Black community, there's a lot of discrimination amongst ourselves. If it's colorism or even just class or status, you know. But yeah, it took a really long time to unlearn those lessons that she taught me about, like, the lighter you are, the more pretty, like, you need to have, you can't go out of the house with your natural hair, you know. I don't know, it's just like all of these little things that you internalize. Yeah.
In my situation, it's interesting because my parents, the Indian parents, they love being Indian. They are so proud of it. They think everything in the world is made in India. Like like anything good is happening is because Indians prayed for it. Like it's everything is like they love it. They love the music, they love the film, and this is kind of like what they tell themselves in many ways. But at the same time, there's this form of the better Indians are closer to whiteness. That is the idea that they actually have. So lighter skin is one of them, like you mentioned, Sarai. There's also the way you talk, what kind of education, what kind of school you should go to, where you should be living. If you live in America or if you live in the UK, it's a great thing because you're closer to that, assimilating yourself into the white culture in that part of the world. Things like that. So it's, in a way, you love yourself, but you're loving yourself as an assimilated version of yourself. So that was the experience that I had with my side of the family.
I can totally relate to that.
Yeah, I think it's similar. Yeah,
it's similar.
Yeah.
I mean, the same thing. My family is so proud of being Filipino and so proud, like, again, with the movies and singers and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And but for example, when we moved to the United States, they would not speak to me in Tagalog. Or they would speak to me in Tagalog, but they would tell me to speak only in English. Because if I don't speak English, I can't succeed, kind of thing. But then I also had to get rid of my accent. And it was this constant, and again, adding to that self-hate of your, like...
Was the accent told to you by your parents directly that you have to change your accent?
It wasn't. It was more
You felt it.
I felt it. It was more of a pressure. They would get these, like, tapes with these videos and stuff, VHS tapes, where you would watch it and you would
VHS, what's that?
VHS. What? Actually, I don't even know what it stands for. Those cassette things.
My
right?
parents used to use it.
Oh, God, I'm so old.
But like we'd have to watch these tapes and we would just imitate, and it was like, we don't speak like this, and that's kind of where that comes from. Is like my parents never told me that, but like. They're getting
the subtext
this.
of everything they did was you need to get rid of your accent.
And the behaviors too. They want, like, especially, also I think this was in the environment. I mean, going into the music world, with a very white music world where I grew up. Yeah. The mannerisms that I would have, like the food that I would bring, for example, would just be just this judgment. So it was this kind of, I had to hide my identity. Yeah. And again, that ideal of trying to assimilate was... the dream.
Can we go off topic for a second?
Yeah.
Food.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I will never eat watermelon in public. Yeah. I would never bring fried chicken to school in my lunch ever. You know, it was like, I don't want to be associated with anything black. Yeah. Like, I mean, I can't hide it because I am
that so
black.
Sad, though?
You know?
Because watermelon's delicious. Yeah. Fried chicken's delicious.
Like, at home in my own kitchen.
Yeah. But on that topic too. So, for example, my boyfriend loves cooking curry, Indian curry. And I love curry too. It's delicious. But at the same time, I'm like, can we not cook today because I have friends coming tomorrow? Because I don't want the place to smell like curry.
I would love it if your place smelled like curry.
No, because that's like ingrained into us as a stereotype.
Sure.
You don't want to be associated with that. You want your place to smell like pumpkin pie instead. So, so that is a sort of it's ingrained into you in many ways. Did you consciously try to form your personal identity around these things? Because like you said, like now you don't eat watermelon.
Yeah.
Is there anything else?
Well, I don't eat watermelon in public, and I've been known to tell people, like, if a white person offers me watermelon, oh no, I'm sorry, I'm allergic to that. Get it away from me. It's like, I don't want any pictures of me near watermelon. I should say I'm a fat black woman. There are so many pictures of like mammy slaves with watermelon. It's just like the furthest thing I want to be associated with.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, I love watermelon.
Yeah.
Confession time. You know, it's delicious.
With a little salt on it?
Yeah.
Oh my
absolutely
goodness.
good. It is. Yeah.
Okay.
You could even do feta cheese, like a salad, like a watermelon salad.
With mint leaves.
Yeah,
Oh
it's
my
really
God,
good.
yes.
All of the black people are going to have a fit. But yeah, definitely. I think that as most other people of color and most other black people specifically, we're very conscious of how we're being perceived. So
because you're trying to please whiteness.
I think I explained this to my husband one time. It was like, okay, if I go out with no hair and no makeup, so like just with my hair natural, which I love doing now, very comfortable. But if I go out with no hair and no makeup, I'm essentially invisible. People will bump into me. They will not hold the door for me. They will not move out of my space, or they will enter my space and try to get me to move.
Yeah.
If I go out with hair but without makeup, slightly better, you know.
Interesting.
And then with hair and makeup, all of a sudden I'm a person, you know. And so maybe part of this is also being a woman.
Yeah.
But it's like these layers of things that you do to try to make yourself more acceptable to the observer. And usually what we're talking about is to white people, you know, to the way white people view us.
Question though. So say you actually, how do you think, or I don't know if you've done it, say you get out of your house, natural hair, say combed, braided, however you actually want to do it, would you have the same reaction as to wearing, say, a wig that may actually look like a white woman would have?
Oh, yes. Okay. There's, you mean, would my natural hair get the same reaction as a white woman's hair?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. It's like there's something that is threatening about black hair specifically. It's like, even within our community, and these sort of ideas are changing with like my generation and the generation after me. But it's like, if you see natural hair, even if it's braided, especially long individual braids, I had a white girl tell me, oh, well, it looks like snakes, so that makes me uncomfortable.
What the
you know? Yeah. So it's just all about appeasing white people. And so like, usually now if I go out with my natural hair, it's literally just sticking up straight on my head and like a fro, which is, I love. And it's taken a really long journey and process to get to the point where I'm comfortable going outside with my natural hair, especially like with my husband, to just be in my natural state. So it took me a long time to get to that sort of identity, where I can be this like bougie black person who loves opera and watermelon and wears her hair naturally and has Berliner style, which is like kind of like garbage. It's like socks with sandals and shorts.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. I was like, what is Berliner style?
So it's like taken me a really long journey to
Yeah.
get to that point. Yeah.
How about you, like Mark? Have you consciously tried to form your personality around those things? Like today, like have you caught yourself doing things or?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Especially coming to Berlin, I feel like I've been made more aware of my brownness and like just my identity in general. I feel like despite the problems that Alaska does have, I was lucky to be living in such a diverse place. And so we had to figure out a way to get along. And so I've actually never lived in such a white country.
Yeah. Okay.
Ever. And so, I mean, I live in Neukölln, so it's a little bit more diverse. So I
Sure.
was just like, oh, this is actually fine. But when I go to like Mitte or I go to
Prenzlauer
Prenzlauer
Berg.
Berg
Oh,
or
God.
something, oh, it's
Get me away from all those strollers.
like I have to, the constant, you have to make the white people around you a little bit more comfortable by smiling a lot more.
Yeah.
Making sure, like, if you see them clutching their bag a little bit, like, for example, when walking down, clutching a bag, or a guy or someone just, like, looking a little, trying to, like, size me up a little bit, I have to try to make myself less intimidating. And I'm not a big guy, and I'm just like, I don't want to be a threat to anyone. And so I've just, something I'm currently working on is how to take up space again here, because I feel like I've never been in such a white space. I don't really know how to navigate it. I learned that I actually don't know how to navigate it, and yeah, I feel like currently I'm trying to form my identity and trying to reconnect with my Filipino heritage, which I have not been associated with because I grew up with this idea of I need to put that aside, I need to be as white as possible, like you were talking about. And it's...
So, like, can I ask a question about that? So, like, even in an environment that was so diverse, it was this understanding that you still needed to be as white as possible.
Yeah. It was because if you were white, you were going to succeed.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. If you have an X, I mean, my last name is already not white, so I have to make sure that my accent has to be as American as possible so that people take me seriously.
Sure.
Or I have to dress, like you said, you have to have your makeup and your hair done.
Yeah.
Dress a certain way so that people will take me seriously. Otherwise, I'm just another Filipino.
Yeah.
And like I'm like another Filipino who's good at cleaning office buildings or or working at McDonald's, which there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just
it's a stereotype.
It's a stereotype.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's just it's hard to fight against that, and it's a lot of effort to be like, why do I have to prove myself? Why do I have to prove that I'm not this?
Yeah, absolutely. I worked as a cleaner when I first got here.
Yeah. When
I first moved to Berlin because I didn't have any money and I needed a visa. And it was something easy, quote unquote. And I was waiting for the bus and this man who told me he was a drug dealer sat next to me and wanted to talk. And then he was like, "You're going to work?" And I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "You're a cleaner."
Oh, God.
And you know what? I was like, well, I am a cleaner, yes, and that's okay. Like, it took me, like, it took, like, everything to not
Do you know
just, like,
what
go
about
up.
you he thought was supposed to be a cleaner?
I'm black. I had on sports clothes. I was up early in the morning, make a checklist, and I
Terrible.
checked them all. But, yeah, it's like this thing of like needing to sit in myself, and just be comfortable. It's like, yes, I am a cleaner actually.
Yeah. So what? It's a job.
Yeah.
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 In my case, with my personal identity, obviously there's the part that we talked about, curry, where I'm trying to get the smell out as possible. I love it, but don't smell like it. Another thing that actually it's interesting when you said that you're walking around the streets of Berlin and you want to be less threatening to people. Same thing. I'm a small guy. Like, I'm the least threatening person ever. Like, you look at me, you probably want to laugh. But but there has been situations where I'm in a majority white neighborhood, not just in Berlin, even in Canada. And this is so funny that actually I've done this, and it felt so normal. I'll walk and people are staring. I feel like it would be easier for them to digest me as a person if I have a Canadian accent. So I would take the phone and talk into it like someone is talking to me. So I'm actually have something else to do, so I can talk in English. Even in Berlin, if I'm walking around, I feel like Berliners or Germans, I guess, have a perception if you're from North America. You're not here as, to mooch off the government sort of idea. Like, that's what they have the perception. So immediately when I talk on the phone with that accent, you can immediately see them being a lot more less tense.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I'm letting everybody know I speak English. I know. Let everybody know I'm gay. I am not a threat.
So that is another thing that actually, which has actually affected me in many ways as well, because it's trying to prove myself to be, I'm not threatening. And I told myself it's me practicing my accent, which is also terrible. Because when I moved to Canada first, I was like, I want to be fitting to that environment as much as possible, compared to having a Dubai accent, for example. And that's the reason why I immediately picked up the accent, because I constantly practiced it.
And I'm adding a question. So hearing that all of our experiences are essentially the same, and so maybe that's indicative of a possible fact that all minorities, especially in the US, kind of have the same sort of internalized views of needing to be more white. So since that's the case, what do we take away from that? What do we want to tell our families? These indigenous people have the same internalized racist ideals that we do, or, what's the outcome? What do we do?
With my family experience, especially being immigrants to Canada, I think immigrant experience, especially people coming from Asia, Middle East, any immigrant actually moving to North America, they first of all have to realize that there are people who paved the way for them to actually even be able to immigrate to the place. So the main problem that a lot of immigrants, I think, especially in my experience, have is they go there, they assimilate into society, and by assimilation I mean they try to be as white as possible. They try to work their way up in the ladder, and they look at, say, for example, black people and say, look, they're not coming up because they're lazy, or they're just not working hard, but they don't realize there are boulders left in their way that they have to jump across.
And it's
and they are part of the history. So
and
they need to realize that.
It's also this sort of idea, the more white you are, but literally skin tone, the more white you are, the easier it is for you to assimilate. Black people are never going to 100% assimilate into the U.S. culture, I say that and I'm still really hopeful,
Keep the hope alive.
It's interesting that I'm learning a lot, honestly, from this conversation, but there's this disconnect that when it's when you're saying the reality of it is having darker skin, being black in North America is just this a setback, but then it's almost at least in globally, but also I see it in the U.S. is that black culture is always trending or always in fashion. But then, if we actually are that,
the saying is everyone wants to be black until it's time to be black.
It's the same thing as that. For example, a lot of people love black excellence. They love consuming it. They love seeing it. But the moment it comes to reality, facing it, they're kind of no sort of idea.
Okay.
Exactly.
Hard pivot.
Yeah.
So then what we're all dying to know is, what did your parents tell you about white people?
Oh my God. Okay. So growing up in Dubai, it was a society. Actually, you know what? Maybe let's keep this conversation for Patreon.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Okay. So guys, you have to go to our Patreon page. It's basically patreon.com/socialtakeout. And over there, we'll continue this conversation of what our parents actually told us about white people.
Yeah, absolutely. Juicy details. So thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
It's been lovely. He's also going to join us on Patreon for this episode. You can also find us on Facebook at Social Takeout and join our discussion page. We want to know maybe not all of the racist things your parents told you about other cultures, but like what has been your internalization of racism, or what's been your journey? So come have that discussion with us. We're also on Instagram at Hello Social Takeout.
And don't forget to rate, review, subscribe on all platforms.
Bye.
Okay, bye!